What I wanted to do is create a video to show some basic C++ functionality around opening files, reading from them, opening files, writing to them, and closing them. This is some required stuff for some of the classes I teach, some of the projects that we work on. I think it's important to kind of walk through it and see how these things work. I will say that as I work through this, I'm going to be putting everything in the main method, which is not great programming standard to follow, but I think it'll make things easier for everyone to see what I'm doing as I do it and have it all together. Feel free when you're doing your projects, decomposition of the main method and modularization with functions or even classes, and minimizing that main method is really important. So I wanted to call out that I'm not doing that, and I um, don't think that's a great thing, but I think it's good for this kind of demonstration. First thing I'm going to do is going to create a new project. I'm going to create an empty project. I'm going to call it right location here. And I do have place solution and project in the same directory selected because I think that's a great thing to do. For simple projects, when you're not going to have multiple projects in a solution, it simplifies the file structure, so it makes it a little bit easier for zipping up to submit. Let's go ahead and create this and see what happens. Perfect. All right, so the first thing we're going to need is a source file, new item, C++ file. I'm fine with that source.cpp name. Let's go ahead and add that. And then let's go ahead and add a couple libraries that we know we're going to need. So we know we're going to need IOStream, because we're going to want to write things out to the console. Let's add fstream, which is a library that gives us the file handlers, the file streams. And we'll go ahead and include string as well. So we wrote some strings. Now, add the namespace to simplify things in the program. And we'll create our main method. And a return statement, since we're using type int. And just to test that everything is working correctly, all right, let's give it a run. Just make sure that we put this together correctly. There we go. Hello world. All right. Now, we don't actually want that hello world in there, so I'll go ahead and remove that. One of the first things we're going to do is I'm going to declare an input stream. I'm going to name it input stream. That's going to be for the file that we read in. I'm going to go ahead and declare one for the output stream as well, for the file that we're going to write out. Now I'm going to go ahead and open a file for reading. So I'm going to call the open method on my input stream, and I'm going to pass it a file name. And we'll just call this input file. And we'll go ahead and select, we'll create the output file as well. What happens here with input stream, when we open it, it's going to look for a file called inputfile.txt, and it's going to open up a handle to it. Same thing with the output stream. It's going to look for one called outputfile.txt and create a stream for it. Big difference here, if input file doesn't exist, that will fail to open. And it doesn't throw an exception or anything like that, but we can check, and I'll show that in a second, how we can check that it opened correctly. Output stream, if you go to open the file and it doesn't exist, it will create that file. All right, so like I said, we want to check to see if things are opened up correctly. So the exclamation point operator here is overloaded for these streams. So if they don't open correctly, or there's a problem with them, it'll return, it returns value that we can use. So I can say here, if input stream is bad, we're going to go ahead and write an error message. We'll return a non-zero code indicating an error. Great, we checked the input stream, but let's go ahead and check the output stream as well. So use Boolean operator, parentheses here. For some reason, it can't write to the file system to create that file. If you didn't find it, we'll get the same error. So we're not going to proceed any further if we have problems with our file handlers. All right. So far, so good. Let's go ahead and create that input file, and let's just run the application where it is right now. We're not doing anything with the files once we open them. We should do something. We should close them. Always good practice. Close these streams when you're done with them. There we go. Now we're not doing anything with the data. We're not even reading it in, but we open, we check to make sure things were open, and then we close. And remember I said that if input stream doesn't find the file, it'll catch here and we'll have that error opening file. So let's see if that works in practice here. So we didn't do anything with it. Doesn't look like there was an exception. Let's go ahead and create that file since we didn't actually access it. Actually, the problem we have here is that I used AND operator. Both files would have to fail. Output won't fail because if it doesn't find it, it creates it. And I've got an OR, so if either of those fail, we get that exception. Let's try it now. There we go. There's that exception I was looking for. All right. That happened because the input file wasn't found. Under resource files here, I'm going to add an existing item, and I bet there's that output file. Except if it doesn't find it, it creates it. So I've added it here so that we're going to be able to see any of the output that's written to it. Now I'm going to right click here and we're going to add a new item. Under utility, we can find the text file. And we're going to name this what we expected it to be, which was input file.txt. And now we have an input file. Now I'm going to write some stuff in here in a moment, but I'm going to go ahead and run this again so we can see that the error doesn't happen because now input file is found. No error again. All right, so far so good. We're seeing what we expect. In the input file, I'm going to write a few lines. I am working well. Save that. And flip back over to the source. And let's see here, we're going to send data in. So I'm going to create a string to hold the data that we read in. I want to loop through all of the lines in that input file that I added. So I'm going to write a while loop. Use this method here, getLine. And we're going to add the input stream, which is where we want it to read from, and where we want it to write to. That's string line. Right now, what we've got is a while loop that's going to loop through every line on the input file and read that data in. And we're not doing anything with it. Let's do something with it. First thing, easy thing to do with it is to write it out to the console. All right, run this, see what happens. There we go. I added that /n, which has added an additional new line. That's why we're getting the space there. But we can clearly see that it's reading the data in from the file, and it's writing it out to the console here. Great stuff. Let's go ahead and close that. And let's do some extra stuff here. Inside this loop, we're also going to write out those lines that we're reading in. Let's write them out to that string that we have, the other file that we've got open. Now, C in and C out, you can read in and read out from the console. Those are the standard, the console in, console out. These streams work very much the same way. So we can do things like read in from the input stream. But there's some technicalities around the white space and new line characters that I didn't want to get into, so I'm using that get line method. For the output stream, let's keep it simple. Let's write a read in line. And here again, we're going to add a new line character. I'll see what happens when we run it. Let's double check just to show you that there's nothing in the output file here. I'm going to go ahead and save this, save everything, and run it. Still going to get our output to the console here, but if I go ahead and close this and open up the output file, all of a sudden we see that it's read in the I, the am, the working well. So go back to our source here. We have a simple application. We create an input stream and an output stream. We open up files for reading and writing. We check to make sure that both are good before we go any further. Then we go line by line, reading in the data from the input file. We write it out to the console to make it easier for us to read, know that it's happening. And then we use this output stream and the double sideways carets, the angle brackets, if you will, and we write to that file some text. I read in the data that we read in, and then a new line character. We close the streams to make sure that we've released the handles on it, and then we return 0, a non-error successful completion of the execution. Now, I'm not going to go into any more detail on what you can do with that data once you've read it in, but within this while loop, you can take those lines and process them in some way. You could, if they were numbers, you could manipulate them, you could multiply them, do whatever you want. You can add text to the line, format it, whatever you need to do, and then output it. A really convenient way to do that would be to create another method that did what you wanted to do to transform that and pass the values in. But quite simply here, we've seen how to open up a file, read it in, print it out a couple different ways, to the console, to an output file, and then clean up after ourselves by closing. Hope this helps. Any questions, feel free to comment. Subscribe if these videos help you, and I'll be adding more. Thank you.